Hello, it has been some time since I've filmed any type of YouTube content, and there are a couple reasons for that. Main reason being I became a mom last summer, and it's been quite an adventure filled with a lot of fun times and definitely some challenges in between, which is to be expected. My son just turned a year old a couple weeks ago, and I can't believe it's already been a year. It doesn't feel like it's been that long. It feels much shorter, but when you're in the thick of it, of motherhood, everything just kind of flies by, especially when you're kind of doing everything for the first time and flying by the seat of your pants. But it's been great, and I'm super thankful for everything I've been able to experience so far. With that being said, now that my son is a little bit older and he is taking more scheduled naps, I just figured I would maybe dive into a little bit more of creative content and share kind of my day-to-day things that have been going on in my corner of the world. And I don't know, I just thought that jumping back into this creative outlet might be fun for me. And so I wanted to give it a try. If it becomes exhausting or frustrating, I won't do it. But now that I have like the itch to do it again, I'm gonna try my best to create some content. And the first kind of video I wanted to make was my birth story. And I've debated whether or not to share this for a while. And over the course of the year, I've seen a lot of other people share theirs. I've seen how all of them are so different. So I wanted to share mine. Before I do share, I do want to preface with the fact that my birth experience wasn't traditional, and I don't want to scare or freak out any moms to be, because that's not my intent here. My intent is just to share what my experience was. So with that being said, let's get into it. I was induced, I had an elective induction at 39 weeks and 5 days, so I was almost 40 weeks pregnant. I elected to induce because I was just at the point where I was ready and it was an option. And all of my cousins, a lot of my friends had elective inductions, and they had, very normal, quick labors. And so I was ready for that. Anyway, my husband and I drove down on Friday at midnight, and we were brought in, scheduled. We were in the labor and delivery room, and I was induced. And from there, I started feeling contractions. I started kind of breathing through these heavy contractions that were like 4 to 5 minutes apart. And then eventually, come Saturday, like mid-Saturday morning, I was really feeling them. And then into the afternoon, I went from, oh my gosh. So I started pushing because I went from like 5 to 10 centimeters super quick. And I started pushing probably around like 8 or 9 p.m. on Saturday. So induced Friday, started pushing late Saturday, and the nurses were great. They were telling me, oh my gosh, you're doing wonderfully. We can see his head, like he has hair, all this stuff. So I'm pushing, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna be one of those moms that pops their baby out in like a couple pushes, right? It's gonna be easy peasy. Oh, how wrong I was. Keep pushing, an hour goes by. Another hour goes by. By the third hour, I'm like wiped. I did elect to get the epidural, so I hadn't eaten, kind of barely had fluids. I wasn't really feeling up to drinking anything. So at this point, in pushing in the third hour, I was kind of going in and out of consciousness, and I started feeling the contractions again, so I had to get the epidural moved back into place with my spine because it had shifted. So that happened. At this point, I can't feel anything. My legs are numb and I'm tired. My husband is trying to rally alongside me as best he can, but we're both tired. Then the fourth hour of pushing comes, and I'm at the point where I kind of suspect something's up. And so I basically say, like, I can't push anymore. Like, I can't do this. Like, I'm literally blacking out. every other push, I'm so lightheaded, I'm so hungry, I'm tired. And, you know, you can see in the nurses' faces, they're tired. And finally, my OB comes in and she's just kind of like looking at me, you know, give it one more push, give it one more push, and it's just not happening. He starts receding back and he's not coming down anymore. So that was a little bit worrisome. And what was very interesting was that no one suggested a cesarean. They just kind of looked at me like I was supposed to initiate that conversation. So I did. I said, what are the other options? And the OB said, we can try the vacuum, which has its own complications, or you would have to go the route of a cesarean. So I said, okay, well, let's try the vacuum. Well, my son had receded so far up that the OB couldn't get the vacuum on top of his head well enough to bring him out. So she kind of looked at me and I looked at her. It was just that moment of realization where, okay, like, get him out of me. I just want him here in my arms. I want him to be safe. I want to be safe. Like, you know, it just got to that point. And so I said, you know, is the only other option right now is a C-section? And she said, yeah. So luckily my OB was also my surgeon. She was phenomenal. It was an operating room full of women only, which was such an amazing experience because I felt so taken care of. Everyone was so nurturing. They were using my first name, like, Carmen, you're doing amazing. Carmen, you're so brave. You know, he's almost out, Carmen. Like, you know, very personalized to your experience, which I thought was really nice. And so they prepped me for surgery. They got me in, they took all my jewelry off, and they had me sign everything. And at that point, I was so tired, I kind of disassociated a little bit. Like, I wasn't even scared. I wasn't nervous. I was so numb that I was almost asleep. Like, on the operating table, when they gave me more, and I guess you would call it like anesthesia, I almost fell asleep while they were taking my son out of me. And I did hear the OB and her assistant when they were operating on me. And my husband heard it too, and he confirmed with me after that. They were chatting, you know, they were all good, having conversation, you know, getting my son out. And then he said both of them went kind of quiet. And at that point, like, he started to panic a little bit, and then I started to panic a little bit. But eventually my son came out and I heard him crying. And of course, like, even just talking about it now, I get so choked up because it was like the most reassuring thing that he was okay. And, you know, I'm crying, my husband's crying. We're just so relieved, so happy. And they take him over to the NICU team real quick just to, like, take his vitals and make sure that he's okay and that he can stay with me. So they go over there. My husband cuts his cord and they bring him to me and they lay him on my chest, and it's like the best thing ever. And it was just that moment of like, oh my gosh, it's so worth it. He was beautiful. He was so tiny and so long, like a string bean. And I could not believe how, like, that was mine. Like, I made that, you know. It's that surreal moment of like, this is a real baby. Like, I see the face of the little one that was kicking me, you know, doing flips in my stomach for, you know, months on end. So it was at the end of the day very beautiful. So we go to the recovery room, the post-birth and recovery room, and, you know, they're taking his vitals, his measurements, and the OB comes in, the one who did my surgery, and she sits down beside me and she says, how are you? You know, how are you doing? You know, baby looks great. And then she proceeds to tell me that the reason he wasn't coming down fully was because his umbilical cord was wrapped twice around his neck. She called it like a double nuchal wrap or something like that. And my jaw just dropped, because how amazing is it that my son knew not to keep receding down the birth canal? Because if you think about it, every time I'm pushing him out, he's getting pulled back by his neck. So there probably came a point where it was just, you know, meant to be, where he was taken out a different way. So I had nothing, because I was definitely feeling a little bit like a failure, you know, when you're just like, man, I couldn't get him out. why couldn't I push him out? You know, I was doing so good, and it had nothing to do with my ability as a mother, but everything to do with the circumstance of my son and what was going on inside of me that we didn't know about. It freaked me out, but it also gave me a sense of peace where I was like, okay, like we made the right choice. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. And he's here safely, sound, and happy. So hearing that kind of, I don't know, it justified the choice to proceed with emergency surgery. And obviously, no matter what, you want your child here safe and healthy. That was kind of an aha moment where I was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense, that he just wasn't coming out. And not by a flaw in my design or his, it was just circumstance. So we ended up staying in the hospital for 4 days because of that emergency surgery. And oh my gosh, I retained so much fluid because they were just pumping me full of fluids. I had a catheter in, and I didn't really move from the bed much the first night. Come the second night, I was able to feel my legs again, and they were very swollen because of the fluids, and I was like waddling to the restroom. I did take a shower while I was at the hospital, and I'm really glad I did. I brought like mini bottles of shampoo, conditioner, and body wash, and I understand they say like they have everything there for you. They have like the essentials, like the bare minimum, like 3-in-1 soap. So if you do want to feel like really refreshed and kind of revived after that whole experience, I would suggest bringing a little travel size kit of those luxury items like conditioner, shampoo, lotion. It was just such a blur, and I felt like I was trapped in that hospital for so long, and our discharge took forever because they sent my prescription to the wrong pharmacy, and that was a whole debacle. But all the nurses were great, like I said, from labor and delivery to recovery to postpartum. Like, they were so helpful. Yeah, that made the experience way better, and I couldn't imagine if I had the opposite. It would have just made it way harder. Able to leave and go home on the 4th day, and it was just so nice to bring my baby home. We had prepped and cleaned and got everything ready because it was an elective induction. It wasn't like spontaneous labor, or, you know, my water didn't break. So we were able to kind of plan a little bit before leaving the house. So everything was as it should be when we got back, which was nice. And yeah, it was just such a great feeling to bring my baby home. Since then, we've been doing really well. I have a really, really great support system with my parents being here and lots of family rallying around us. My mom literally was like delivering homemade meals every other night to us. And now that I see what I have such a different view and level of respect for moms that don't have family around, whether it's because their family can't help because of circumstance or location, or because they don't have contact with their family for whatever reason, or their family isn't alive anymore. So I can't imagine having to just suck it up and not be able to call your mom and ask her to come over while you pump and your baby's screaming. And I can't imagine not having that extra set of willing hands, like hands that are actually helping. Those that, like I said, are on an island or don't have those resources. It's just, I cannot imagine. Thank you for listening if you stayed this long, and I hope to see you very soon in another video, and I hope to stick with creating more content in this phase of my life. Thank you so much.